Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the May 13th, 2023 County Board meeting. I am Board Chair Christian Dorsey, joined today on the dais by my colleagues, Mr. Carantonis, Ms. Crystal, Mr. DeFerranti, and joining us remotely is Vice Chair Garvey, who is participating from Aachen, Germany, where as liaison to the Arlington Sister Cities Association, she is attending their annual Charlemagne Prize ceremony featuring honoree Volodymyr Zelensky of Ukraine. So thank you for joining us all here in the boardroom this morning, as well as remotely through Microsoft Teams. A few announcements before we begin with our public comment, the first portion of our meeting. You are welcome to wear masks. They are optional. If you would like a mask, please see our clerk here at the front, or I believe there's some that are available in the atrium as well. And you may see us board members wearing masks based on our own individual preferences. We will have people participating in the meeting remotely, doing presentations and such, including county staff and other presenters. For those of you who are here to speak and are in the room, the lectern up here can be adjusted to a height to your preference by using the up or down arrows, which are located to the right as you face us. You don't have to touch any other buttons, just speak clearly into the microphone so that everyone can hear you. If you have documents that you would like to provide to the board, please hand those to our clerk, Ms. Jacobs, and make sure that your name and contact information is included on all documents that you submit. For those who are participating remotely, please keep your microphones muted and your cameras off until you are recognized to speak. You'll need to unmute yourself if you're joining by phone by pressing *6. Otherwise, you can just click the microphone button on the toolbar if you are joining using Teams on either an app or a browser. And occasionally you may see board members leave this room. It doesn't mean that we are leaving the meeting. We can follow the proceedings from the back of the room. And we are now, ready to hear from our public comment speakers. As a reminder, the purpose of our public comment is to alert members of the board to issues that have not been subjected to a recent public hearing or are scheduled for an upcoming public hearing, to ensure that we can hear from a range of speakers. To ensure that we can hear a range of topics. We do have a one speaker per topic rule. Remember, this is again to introduce issues to the board. This helps us all manage the main purpose of our meeting today, and that is to go through the items that are on the agenda, which has been properly noticed and publicized. We appreciate everyone's help in adhering to our meeting procedures and being fair and respectful to your fellow residents. If you are here as part of a coordinated group today, we ask that you identify one person who will speak on your behalf. You can certainly let us know in ways that are not disruptive that you associate yourself with their remarks. And also understand that there are other ways in which you can engage members of the board to discuss issues that are a little bit more dynamic than providing 3 minutes of public testimony. You can find out information about those ways by writing us at countyboard@arlingtonva.us, but I want to specifically highlight a feature that allows you to speak with members of the board and really not have much of a time limit other than what is reasonable, and that is our Open Door Monday process, where you can sign up, speak to members of the board in the evening, and again, nothing other than same-day registration is required. So if you have any questions about that, you can also see our clerk, Ms. Jacobs, or visit the website for all of the ways in which you can engage the board. All right, with all of that said, Ms. Jacobs, I think we're now ready for public comment.
Yes, our first speaker is Ulysses Terry, followed by Esther N.
Good morning. My name is Ulysses Terry, and I live on Nelson Street in South Arlington. I'm here to speak about the parking lot that they have. I bought some pictures that the Moss has. And I keep hearing that once the parking lot is built or finished, that everything will be taken care of. But as you can see in these pictures, the parking lot has been in use even before 2012. And it is jam-packed. Knocking down the house and paving that parking lot over there is not going to increase the size of that for the cars. So I'm here to try to find a way to get this situation really taken care of. Last Friday, my car was blocked in for 30 minutes, and I couldn't get, as you see, it's this car there, I couldn't get out for 30 minutes, so I had to cancel the meeting and push everything back. And I'm getting kind of frazzled because I'm trying to condense my life into 3 or 4 days instead of a week. That's pretty much all I have to say today.
Thank you, Mr. Terry.
All right.
Our next speaker is Esther N., followed by Armand Cicerelli. Esther? Esther N.
You have an interpreter, so I'm gonna interpret for her.
We do have someone who is here to help you.
Oh, okay, okay. Pues ella me va a entonces. Sí, sí, ahí estoy.
Buenos días.
Buenos días.
Estoy aquí hoy para decirles que tienen que hacer más por la vivienda asequible.
Yes, good morning. I'm here to tell you that you need to do more for affordable housing.
Hemos creado un grupo de inquilinos y una de nuestras principales demandas es ser parte de interesada en Barcroft durante 99 años.
We have created a group of tenants, and one of our main demands is to be a speaking part in Barcroft during these 99 years.
Sabemos que el condado prestó $150 millones al dueño de Barcroft, Jay Lynch.
We know that the county loaned $150 million to Jerry Lynch
Para que no fuéramos desplazados, pero fallaron en hacer un plan real de cómo sería asequible para nosotros.
so we wouldn't be displaced, but they fail in making a plan, a real plan of how will it be accessible for us.
Es por eso que queremos ser parte de la toma de decisiones y también queremos que todos ustedes se sientan con esta otra demanda de que nadie debe beneficiar del dinero de la vivienda asequible.
That's why we want to be part of this decision, and also we want you to know that nobody can take advantage of this money for affordable housing.
Si algún edificio está o ha tomado dinero, debe ser 100% controlado de alquiler localmente. Queremos que nuestra comunidad debe permanecer en su casa.
If any builder has taken money, it has to be 100% controlled rent locally. We want our community to stay in their homes for the next years.
Que nuestra comunidad permanezca en su casa en los próximos años y aparte de eso, invertir en nosotros, no en Amazon y la policía.
And also we want you to invest in us, not in Amazon or the police.
Thank you.
Gracias. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Armand Cicerelli, followed by Audrey Clement.
Good morning. I'm Armand Cicerelli, representing the Columbia Heights Civic Association. So at the last recessed board meeting, DPR presented their near-term plans for siting additional courts, pickleball courts that is, around Arlington County and limiting play at the community center, Walter Reed, to conform to its hours of operation. They indicated that court availability should be spread relatively evenly around the county. That said, there's a number of defects in the plan which need to be addressed prior to moving forward. So whereas DPR did indicate they're going to stripe additional pickleball courts and tennis courts, they say they don't plan to start this until June and finish it in September. That means there'll be an entire another summer of peak pickleball play at Walter Reed with no mitigation from additional courts. That's problem number one. Issue number two is, I'm not an expert, I don't play pickleball, but it's been conveyed to me that the pickleball courts planned for Virginia Highlands Park may be non-functional. The courts have been designed in such a way, I'm told, that it doesn't leave enough room for players to serve the ball properly. And as such, if DPR stripes these courts as planned, they'll be unusable for players. I'd ask that you please investigate this and make sure that they're designed properly. The new courts will require reservations to play. All of the new courts will require reservations. There'll be no drop-in play. So this is a situation which is a problem because Walter Reed, the largest site, is also the only site that allows drop-in play. As such, all locations should allow for drop-in play. That is, no reservations needed if we're truly seeking to distribute demand around the county. Otherwise, Walter Reed is going to continue to be the prime pickleball destination in the county. To be clear, there's plans for striping courts around the county. All these other courts are at least 200 feet, more than twice as far away from residences as the Walter Reed courts are. All the other courts are getting sound mitigation. Walter Reed is getting no sound mitigation. So all the new courts get sound mitigation. They're at least twice as far away, and they have sound mitigation. Walter Reed is 90 feet away, no sound mitigation for the foreseeable future. And so how is that feasible? How are we supposed to absorb that? Even though you recently reduced the number of hours to 13 hours a day, which is still 80 hours
Thank
a
you,
week.
Mr. Ciccarelli. We
Thank you
appreciate
for your time.
comments.
Our next speaker is Audrey Clement, followed by Ada Paz. Ms. Clement?
Do you hear me?
Now we can, yes.
Okay. I'm Audrey Clement, the independent candidate for county board. Last week, I sent out an e-blast with a glaring error. I reported that county board members' salaries had increased by 75% since 2015, while the consumer price index went up only 2.5% over the same period. In fact, the CPI increased 23.5% between 2015 and 2022. While there is no excuse for misreporting statistics, the actual numbers do raise questions about county board's decision to increase its salaries. The problem is not the amount of the increase, although board member salaries will increase 15% from $77,000 to $89,000, and the chair salary will go up from $83,000 to $95,000. The problem is the lack of transparency. While Arl now reported the latest salary numbers following budget adoption on April 22nd, Arlington County Board salary hike was not included in the county manager's budget for fiscal year 2024. Instead, it surfaced as a line item for additional expenditures in a staff report for the April 22nd board meeting. Thus, no one outside county government knew about the salary hike prior to publication of the meeting agenda. Some may agree with Libby Garvey that the board deserves a pay hike. Considering that it is largely staff-driven and does little real work, I have my doubts. What bothers me, though, is that board salary hikes are not published along with other proposed salary adjustments in the annual budget. If indeed board members are worth their salt, why didn't they advertise the proposed increase upfront, as did the Fairfax County Board of Supervisors this year? It's obvious that fiscal transparency requires it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Your next speaker is Ada Paz. Ms. Clement, can you mute your line, please? Our next speaker is Ada Paz, followed by your Dondos Waldi.
Hi, good morning. I'm going to be helping with the interpretation. I understand that a volunteer interpreter was put together, but in the future, we ask that a professional interpreter be provided so that access to the government is made available to our community members. So, okay, she's going to share now.
Okay. I'm here to assert my right to be heard. I was born in Arlington. My family has lived in Arlington for many decades. It is urgent that the Arlington County Board remove Section 7 of the trust policy for complete protection against ICE abuse by ending all voluntary police cooperation with ICE in Arlington and ensure that our undocumented immigrant communities remain safe and not under the siege of ICE. Your job as board members is to listen and make community voices heard. After seeing everything that's happening in Florida, the actions of ICE in Las Vegas, and even local rumors that there have been police arrests and migration. Our community is entering a crisis of anxiety and persecution that no one should experience. We even fear going back to the years when raids were made. We want ICE out of Arlington. I'm sorry. There's a lot of people here that don't speak English, so we'd enjoy it for an interpreter to be provided. Thank you.
Okay. En español, estoy aquí para hacer valer mi derecho a ser escuchada. Vivo en Arlington desde hace muchos años y es urgente que la Junta del Condado de Arlington elimine la sección 7 de la póliza de la confianza para tener protección completa contra el abuso de ICE, al poner a fin a toda colaboración voluntaria de la policía con ICE en Arlington y así garantizar que nuestras comunidades inmigrantes indocumentadas permanezcan seguras y no bajo el asedio del ICE. Su trabajo como miembros de la Junta es escuchar y hacer que las voces de la comunidad sean escuchadas. Después de ver todo lo que sucede en Florida, las acciones de ICE en Las Vegas, e incluso rumores locales que han habido retenes de la policía, la migra nuestra comunidad está entrando a una crisis de ansiedad y persecución que nadie debe experimentar. Incluso tenemos volver a los años en que hacían redadas. Queremos ICE fuera de Arlington. Thank you. Gracias.
Thank you. Okay.
Our next speaker is Yordondos Waldai.
I'd like to submit some paperwork.
So after you speak, you can submit
Okay.
them.
Good morning, County Board members. My name is Jordanos Waldai. I'm joined today with my neighbors who are in support of my public comment to ask that the county provide additional police enforcement and patrolling in the Green Valley community. I would like to state at the outset that the Arlington County Police Department's Public Safety Engagement Division has been a great partner in our efforts to make Green Valley safe, particularly Deputy Chief Wayne Vincent. However, we do need to go further to address public safety concerns of residents. My neighbors and I who have signed a petition which has 37 signatures to request regular police enforcement and patrolling in Green Valley in order to address the regular occurrence of illegal activities around the John Robinson Jr. Town Square, including public consumption of alcohol, public marijuana use, public urination, noise violations, parking violations, and an inability to access public sidewalks due to loitering. My neighbors and I support technological law enforcement tools where they could assist ACPD in their response to criminal activity and operate as a deterrent. These tools may include video cameras, gunshot detectors, and license plate readers. Residents in Green Valley who live in close proximity to the town square cannot enjoy many of the basic things that are afforded to other Arlingtonians. Like the rest of Arlington County, my neighbors and I want to be able to walk our children to school or local parks without being subjected to marijuana smoke or watching people consume alcohol for hours on end, only to urinate on our homes in plain sight. We want to have a good night's rest without having to be woken up by loud music playing from industrial-sized speakers all night so that we can be ready to go to work and school the next morning. Our children...
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
That concludes the public commenters.
Okay, thank you very much, and appreciate everyone who came this morning to advise the board of your concerns. We'll have a brief opportunity to just address some of the issues that were raised, starting with Mr. Terry. Good to see you again, but of course we are not pleased that you are continuing to experience difficulty, including the personal disruption to your work schedule as a result of the issues. I do know that we have shared with you in this room at this forum that these issues require some pretty substantial investments to fix in terms of the capital investments with the parking, and then they also require some operational diligence as it relates to properly monitoring the activity in Green Valley on the part of the BIC, as well as any necessary enforcement from our police department. I do understand that there's a meeting scheduled on the books where staff will again engage with you next week, and that will include, I believe, Board Member DeFerranti, so I'll give you an opportunity to speak to that. But certainly it is our interest to make sure that there can be a harmonious living together of the BIC and the community, and particular attention paid to the crunch time when Friday afternoon particularly is overwhelmed with a lot of vehicular traffic. Mr. DeFerranti.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Terry, I look forward to the conversation. I believe that you've made even closer connection with our police department, though you already are, I think we're engaged. To your central point today regarding the long term of this, and I know Mr. Carantonis is also engaged a little bit, but to your central point, I think it's fair to say that simply the parking structure would not alleviate all of the concerns. It's going to take both efforts and multiple efforts to try and address this. And some of those are the connections that you made so that things like what happened on Friday don't reoccur. And then some of it also, I do think there can be some marginal benefit. Exactly how much of the long-term approach, I won't say that it's the silver bullet, but I do think we need to continue to work on building those connections and trying to address your concerns. I know you've been up several times. I'm looking forward to our conversation next Wednesday. And that's sort of what I would add. I don't know, Mr. Chair or Mr. Carantonis.
All right, moving on. Esther, thank you for joining us this morning. And as I heard your testimony and looked out at the sea of signs, I couldn't find myself agreeing more with the sentiments, and I just want to make sure that some of the context is provided. So many of the signs and your testimony really spotlighted that you wanted to make Barcroft affordable. We agree. That's why the county made an unprecedented $150 million investment to ensure that the Barcroft community would have strict covenants that the 1,334 give or take units would remain affordable to families at an average of 60% of area and median income for 99 years. In other words, for my lifetime, your lifetime, and our children's lifetimes, Barcroft will be a place that has at least 1,334 affordable units. There was also a lot of testimony about people not wanting to be displaced from their homes. We entirely agree. That's why part of the deal included a requirement that for the very first year that there be absolutely no change, no increases in rent, and that thereafter rent increases be limited to no more than 3% a year. And that at the same time, people who were living in Barcroft before without the security of leases month to month, knowing that from 1 month to the next, their housing could be lost and was entirely unsecure, that there be a requirement that people be converted to leases. And that process is going on right now, and people have an opportunity while they're considering for, I believe it's a period of 3 months, whether or not to stay on under their lease. They will receive no rent increases during that period. So we are very much focused on ensuring that there is no displacement of tenants from Barcroft who want to remain, and that the circumstances are such where it is as affordable as can reasonably done in the Commonwealth of Virginia. And speaking to one of Esther's policy proposals about localized rent control, while that is something that certainly we hear from a lot of people who struggle with the increases in rent, that is not something that we are allowed to do by law in the Commonwealth of Virginia. But I do want to underscore that the rent increases at Barcroft by contract will far be reduced compared to the rate of increases in rent at non-Barcroft properties in the region. So thank you very much for your concerns, your comments. We share quite many of them and are happy to connect you with opportunities to learn more about how we've structured this so that people who live at Barcroft can be more secure in their housing and eventually be a part of renovated and improved housing. Any other comments, colleagues? Ms. Garvey? Moving next to Mr. Ciccarelli, thank you very much. At this point, we have had so many conversations about pickleball. I don't trust myself to know all of the policy decisions operational decisions that have been made. There are a couple of things as it relates to what's going to happen at Walter Reed that I'm not sure consistent with what I understand. So at this point, I want to encourage you to engage with the website and with park staff just to make sure you're fully aware of what they plan, because it's not quite as I heard it presented. But certainly, we are sort of building this plane as we're flying it, as it relates to trying to accommodate a lot of pickleball demand with facilities that are not really well suited for pickleball in neighborhoods. So I don't ask that people give us the grace to mess up anymore, but also give us the grace to try and refine this as we go. Any other pickleball comments, Mr. Karantonis?
It's not per se a pickleball comment, it's just to remind everybody that on May 23rd, the Parks and Recreations Department will be hosting an information session right at Walter Reed, if I'm not mistaken. So there will be ample time and the availability of experts to discuss all the technical details Riley has brought forward today and in past Open Door Mondays.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, Ms. Garvey.
Yeah, thank you. And I appreciate all the comments. And I will just say I totally agree with what you said. That's not my memory. I do know I've had a number of briefings, and sound mitigation is a lot of the discussion. So I'd be very surprised if there's no sound mitigation planned. And just emphasize your encouragement that Mr. Cigarelli get in touch with our staff and participate in the information sessions. Thank you.
Thank you. Hope the weather and the environment is fine in Germany.
We actually brought good weather. They can't believe it. It's
Great.
amazing. It was supposed to rain. It's nice. Thank you.
Excellent. Ms. Clement, your concern about board salaries probably won't do anything to change your mind, but will remind you, if you weren't aware already, that in 2019 there was an extensive board report, public hearing, public surveys about board salaries, which set a maximum level of board salaries that this action of the board most recently got closer to realizing. So that was something that was the subject of a very transparent, open engagement in 2019. Because of the pandemic and other economic concerns, a lot of that movement towards that increase, which at that point was expected to be gradual, was deferred while we addressed other community priorities. As a result of the budget process this year, the board decided that it would make a little bit more of a dent in moving closer to those maximums that are already allowed. Whether or not you agree that was the right thing to do, I probably will not convince you, but you should at least know the full context. Mr. DeFerranti.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just succinctly to the core of Ms. Clement's point, I thought, for one, that it was appropriate for the board to take ownership of the decision, and thus I'm fine with the manager not including, and I spoke at several times in our lead up to the importance of our owning, or as I voted for it, some did not and some abstained, but I think it's appropriate for us to own the decision. And so I think that is the, in fact, most transparent way to approach this.
Thank you. Mr. Karantonis.
Just in addition to what has been said so far, also last year when we decided the first part of this increase, we referred to the 2019 goal of approaching the 100% AMI. So that was also basically in the line of thinking already from last year.
Thank you. Okay, moving next to Ms. Paz. Thank you very much. And first, let me apologize to anyone who had been in need of language assistance. We unfortunately had staffing difficulty, but we are greatly appreciative of Ms. Calixto Mendoza for volunteering and stepping in the very last minute. And as to the substance of the concerns, we've certainly engaged with people who have represented the viewpoints about ICE broadly. And we have gone through, as it relates to our trust policy, which is mentioned, an extensive public engagement that included many Arlingtonians who are disproportionately affected by immigration enforcement in the crafting of a trust policy that was tailored for Arlington needs and concerns. While we recognize that there will always be disparate viewpoints on whether or not every title and article of that policy is what they would want, we feel pretty confident that it reflects what Arlingtonians require out of their local government, out of law enforcement, and the rest. So we appreciate your comments. We have noted that we have heard them many times before. We appreciate that you were a part of that previous engagement, but the policy that was enacted is the result of something that accommodates all of the stakeholder interests that were brought to the table. Any other comments? Next, we'll move to Ms. Waldi. Thank you very much, and appreciate you and your fellow neighbors in Green Valley advising us of these concerns, although hearing the concerns saddens me greatly when it relates to public safety, perceptions of public safety, actual criminal activity. These are matters that we take with utmost seriousness. And as it relates to Arlington, it does no good to talk about Arlington being a safe place in the aggregate if there are places in the particular where that is not actually true. Now, that said, we certainly have engaged a lot with talking about the issues that you have raised from Green Valley. And while we absolutely, there's no distance between us sharing these as priorities to address, we also know that from within the community, there are disparate views on how to actually do it. Now, that said, our response can't be to do nothing. So we actually have to figure out how to reconcile all those disparate views and utilize our best practices in technology utilization, policing, and community participation to figure out how to fix this, because it's got to be fixed. So to that end, the manager has already, in advance of your testimony here today, convened an internal stakeholder group that's going to be meeting next week to begin making sure that we have comprehensively looked at what government agencies can do, propose to do, before we'll then engage with the Green Valley community about some specific opportunities to very much improve your quality of life, to reduce any nuisance element, and to actually police criminal behavior. So with that, I'll leave it to the manager for additional comments before members of the board.
Thank you, Mr. Dorsey. And I also want to thank Ms. Waldi for coming in. And she's been working closely with, she and the people who are with her have been working closely with, as she mentioned, Deputy Chief Vincent. One of the things I asked the police department to do, because to me it was a point of not only interest but concern, is this question about patrols and response time to Green Valley in contrast to the rest of the community. And this is not meant to diminish the points you're making at all, because I understand the quality of life issues you have. But I thought it would be useful for you to know, we did an analysis of calls for service from the time from dispatch to arrival on scene in the county. The time in Green Valley was 5 minutes and 58 seconds compared to 6 minutes and 28 seconds elsewhere in the county. And for priority one calls, those are the ones where there's actually a serious crime in progress. The response times in Green Valley were 2 minutes and 14 seconds in contrast with 2 minutes elsewhere. So we'd always like them to be faster, but I think that's in keeping with what we do across the county. Also, the other point, and this is something that came up during the budget work session we had, I don't want people to think that because we have about a 15% vacancy rate in the police department that somehow our on-the-street presence has been diminished. We talked about that. We're under a lot of stress. We have a lot of overtime being done by our police department, but I feel as if we're doing what we need to do there. Having said all that, the question about patrols and regularity of patrols, we want to continue to have that conversation, because there may be things that we can do to adjust that and tweak that. And as the chair mentioned, we convening internally a conversation. We've also had the Green Valley Task Force, which has been working through different county agencies to have conversations about that. On the technology options, I'm very much aware of some of the shot spotting and other technologies, some of which have been in use in nearby Prince George's County. We are actually very actively looking at that, especially the LPR readers. There's a lot of promise there. And I'm probably going to come back in the next 3 or 4 weeks with some suggestions to the board about ideas that we could use. There are It's not as simple as saying we'll just put a bunch of cameras up and do things because we're in a community where we need to explain how that would happen. But there are examples where it has worked, and I think that holds some promise, but that is not meant to be a substitute for in-person action by the police department.
Thank you. Mr. DeFerranti and then Mr. Karantonis.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My comments are pretty succinct in that I want to thank you, each of you, for coming, and then thank you for both sharing their comments in writing, and the petition, in addition to all of you coming today, because it's the combination of both that helps us follow through. And I also want to thank the manager for the detail with which he's thinking this through, as well as the chair. But just a thank you. I know others are really working the details. I'm appreciative of that.
Thank you, Mr. Karantonis.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Ms. Voldai, for coming, and everybody as well. And I have to tell you, I also thank other members of your neighborhood with whom I have had the opportunity to engage, not only lately, but quite a bit. I'm a neighbor not too far away. I live off 16th Street. So I visit very often. I bike through, I walk through. So I'm very familiar with the blocks between the 22nd Street and 23rd Road, right? Or 24th Road, 24th Road. So, and I see the challenges. And I have to tell you that I understand that you want action, to see more action, to see more results, et cetera. What I'm very encouraged about is that the community actually itself has been sitting down and having community conversations where different opinions are, exchanged, and they are challenging us on many things, not only on how much police force or active presence of uniformed law enforcement will have there, but also other things that deal with youth culture, that deal with issues of alcohol, that deal with substance abuse issues that may concentrate there. Outdoor living is, in my understanding, a part of actually a hallmark trait of the Green Valley community. I mean, it's something very special to Green Valley, even more than other places in Arlington. The new John Robinson Square was specifically designed to accommodate these uses and this kind of social living. So we are partners here, not only on the uniformed police side, but also in being smart in all other types of intervention of social services, of wraparound services, et cetera. I personally have seen how over time things have evolved. I mean, I'm not very happy to see that the Shelton, for example, has now lighting like if it was a prison complex from above, that we have a lot more cameras. And I understand that this is a reaction to things, but this also says that we haven't made as much progress as we wanted in actually mitigating the. So a lot of work ahead of us and for the community as well. Thank you.
Vice Chair Garvey, you are muted.
Thank you. Yeah, I want to add my thanks to just everyone for coming in, and I had the pleasure of speaking with Ms. Woldai a little while ago, a few days ago, and hearing about her experiences right now. I'm really pleased to hear that there's actually a group coming together, because it does sound like there's some splits in the community, and we really need to deal with that. I'm glad that we actually are sort of tackling it all head on and bringing everybody together, because I think that's the only way to really deal with this. And I was struck by the first speaker, Mr. Terry, who's been in a number of times, and our last speaker. It really is about harmonious living together, and outdoor living is great, as Mr. Karantonis was talking about, and that's what we want to encourage. But people have to be respectful of others. There's some structure and some rules that have to be followed if we're all going to be harmonious together. And I'm glad we're kind of really focusing on this, and I'm hopeful and want to do what I can to make sure that this situation gets better for the folks living there, because this really is a wonderful community. And I think, as you stated, Mr. Chair, it needs to be good for everybody everywhere in the county, not just in some places. Thank you.
Thank you. And so as we finish this conversation, I think one of the things that we're always very sensitive to is to whether or not there's anything that we're doing that is continuing systemic disparities that have persisted in the past. And I appreciate the manager taking a look at response times to make sure that we don't have those fundamental disparities. But I'll remind everyone that that's simply step one. Our county aspires to equity. which is the principle that we're not just trying to make sure everything is equalized throughout Arlington, but that each and every circumstance is given what it requires so that people can thrive. And so that's the spirit that we bring to engaging with Green Valley, not to make sure that just simply things are par with what we do elsewhere, but are specifically contributing to an improved quality of life for everyone as it relates to our principles of equity. So thank you for your comments, the petition, and for the conversation, as well as to everyone who attended our public comment this morning. We are now ready to move to our consent agenda, and I know we've had to pull one item from the consent agenda. Ms. Jacobs, any more?
No, no others except for, would you like me to announce that? 7A and 7B,
Right.
open air market at Met Park.
So at this point, colleagues, there is every opportunity for someone to make a motion to approve the consent agenda with the exclusion of items 7A and 7B.
Thank you for the opportunity. I'll take it. I'll move the consent agenda.
Thank you so much, Mr. DeFerranti, and thank you, Ms. Crystal, for that second. We'll now move on to consider the consent agenda minus items 7A and 7B. Any further discussion? Then move to a vote. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The ayes have it 5-0. And with that action, the board has just taken advantage of the opportunity to approve dozens of items on the consent agenda, including minor site plan amendments, use permit requests, ordinance amendments, request to advertise, and more. We put those items on our consent agenda because they are believed to be non-controversial, but that doesn't mean that they aren't important. So in a second, I'll take a few minutes to highlight the several items in particular. There was an item that was pulled from our consent agenda, and we will hold a public hearing on that item on Tuesday, May 16th, no earlier than 6:30 p.m. If you would like to speak to that item that was pulled, you can sign up on the county board's website starting today, or by calling the board office beginning Monday, 703-228-3130. Now, on to some of the items that we approved among the 30 or so as part of our consent agenda. One was nope, take that one off. Item number 10, the continuation of the Commercial Market Resiliency Initiative. So the board approved amending the zoning ordinance to allow by right broadcasting operations, research and development, and flex space use within most commercial, mixed use, and industrial districts. Podcasting and research and laboratory spaces alongside traditional offices are very typical in the way in which commerce is being conducted in vibrant communities. And so we're now going to allow that in Arlington without going through a use permit approval process. So we're excited that these continued changes, these continued amendments to our zoning ordinance will allow Arlington to remain competitive and, quite frankly, just with it as it relates to the way activity is currently occurring in the world. We'll move to item 16. This is the issuance of bonds in the amount of $196.4 million in general obligation bonds to finance new county and school capital projects and to refund high interest rate debt. Historically, the county has requested authorization from voters to finance capital projects with bonds on a biennial, every 2-year basis, and issue these bonds when we actually need them. A breakdown of the voter-approved projects is available in connection with the board report for people who want an exhaustive list. Next, item 17. The board is excited to have endorsed a preferred alternative for the Crystal City to National Airport Multimodal Connection, otherwise known as CC2DCA. The goal of this connection is to enhance connectivity for non-vehicular travel between Crystal City and the airport while supporting active transportation and travel choices. This preferred alternative would be a pedestrian bridge that crosses the George Washington Memorial Parkway, connecting the future Virginia Railway Express South Entrance Station and 2011 Crystal Drive to the airport. This is really going to be an incredibly exciting feature. I have no doubt that it will look amazing, but more importantly, it'll be a pretty signature element of connectivity that you see in few places elsewhere. Next, we have an MOU for non-custodial respite between DHS and Child Welfare Services. This is item 24. And so this is an important action which ordinarily wouldn't get much attention, but in situations where a parent or legal guardian is involved with child welfare in Arlington, the board has approved a template which allows them to receive some support. And this is necessary in terms of our overall goals of making sure that we can keep those familial connections in times of crisis, so that these families don't have to relinquish custody to children to the Department of Human Services. Previously, this form of respite and support was available only to foster parents, and we are excited that this will strengthen our ability to make sure that we can provide for the best needs, the specific needs of children in very unstable circumstances. Moving next, we've accepted a number of grants as part of our agenda today, items 20, 21, 22, and 23. Board has authorized the county manager to accept nearly $676,000 in state funding for Arlington with specific allocations of $240,000 to implement the Virginia Recovery Initiative project, which fosters wellness and recovery for Arlingtonians struggling with mental health and or other substance abuse issues. $128,500 from the Virginia Department of Aging and Rehabilitative Services to enhance and improve our adult protective services related to investigations of abuse, neglect, and exploitation. Nearly $200,000 from the Virginia Department of Behavioral Health to support DHS in its electronic record quality assurance efforts, and a little under $120,000 from the Virginia Department of Housing and Community Development to support our ongoing prevention and rental relief aid for Arlington residents still affected by the pandemic. Got a couple of requests to advertise to close out these remarks, items 31 and 32. We have authorized the advertisement of public hearings related to the general land use plan. Item 31 for future hearings by the Planning Commission and Board to change the 2500 Wilson Boulevard block from low office apartment hotel to a medium office apartment hotel designation. And item 32, advertisement of public hearings for a proposed amendment that would create an interim use of a publicly owned parking lot, the site of 3108 Columbia Pike, the former SunTrust Bank location, as a feature that will be shown in the county's comprehensive plan. All right, I need a drink. So we are now ready to move on to our regular agenda. Ms. Jacobs, would you please call that item?
Yes, items number 34A and B, consideration of an acceptance of a special general land use plan study document for 2000 North Glebe Road, as well as a request to advertise future public hearings by the Planning Commission and County Board to consider a GLUP amendment from low residential to low medium residential for the area located at the northwestern corner of North Glebe Road and 20th Street North.
Thank you very much. Mr. Schwartz.
Yes, I'd like to welcome to the county boardroom Margaret Tulloch Rhodes and her assistant, Anthony Fusarelli.
Good morning. In 2008, the County Board adopted the policy for consideration of general land use plan amendments unanticipated by previous planning efforts. This policy calls for a community review process in those instances where there is either no adopted plan, as is the case here, or where the general land use plan amendment request is inconsistent with the guidance of the relevant adopted plan. Special general land use plan studies evaluate the appropriateness of the requested GLUP change and analyze what GLUP category or categories may be appropriate. The subject site is situated at the northwest corner of North Glebe Road and 20th Street North, a few blocks south of Langston Boulevard. The site includes the existing Sunrise parcel and 2 adjacent R6 parcels, one with a single home detached dwelling. Here again, you can see the site, and it is located along Glebe Road, which I will note is an arterial. The applicant's request is for an amendment to the general land use plan to change the designation from low residential to low medium residential. The applicant anticipates also requesting a rezoning from the R6 zoning district to the RA18 zoning district, which is a mixed-use district. The applicant is seeking to rebuild the aging facility to provide updated and expanded elder care uses. Here we can see an excerpt from the general land use plan and our zoning map. The general land use plan establishes the county's land use vision. This slide identifies the existing general land use plan designations near the subject site. The subject site is, again, low residential, 1 to 10 units per acre. In the general vicinity are areas designated low residential and public, and you can see low medium residential adjacent to low residential to the northeast of the site. In terms of zoning, the site is designated R6, which is typically a single-family residential district. In terms of our community engagement, we established, of course, a project webpage. We had 2 long-range planning committee meetings, and the LRPC was comprised of members of the Glebewood and Waverly Hills Civic Association, the Housing Commission, the Forestry and Natural Resources Commission, the Commission on Aging, the Disability Advisory Commission, the Transportation Commission, and the Pedestrian Advisory Committee. We also had a community engagement session that was open for over a month, and we had 144 total responses. We then had an online comment period on the draft study document that was open for 2 weeks, and we had a total of 16 responses. At its recent meeting, the Planning Commission voted 8-1 in favor of accepting the study document and 8-0 in favor of advertising the general land use plan amendment. The guiding principles that we developed with input from the LRPC, the Planning Commission, and the community are the following. Ensure building scale, massing, and materials complement the surrounding area. Provide for attractive and welcoming pedestrian level conditions through tree conservation, landscaping, other biophilic design, and underground parking. Enhance access, connectivity, and safety for users of all modes of travel. Prioritize sustainability and stormwater management, and prioritize senior living. Parking, access, stormwater, and other considerations would also need to be addressed as part of any potential future site plan redevelopment. Here we can see a 3-dimensional model of the existing site. And next, we have modeled both an elder care and a multifamily scenario, as this is, of course, a high-level land use study exploring multiple land use options. Staff modeled both land uses at the same density level, which is the maximum floor area ratio, or FAR, for elder care of 1.5 FAR, with no bonus density for that specific use. Next, scenarios 2 and 3 show the same model, but with a modest bonus density of 0.2 FAR for the elder care scenario and the corresponding level of density for the multifamily scenario to account for potential bonus density to incentivize a community benefit such as a green building incentive. The first scenario shows a lower uniform 4-story height across the site. The second scenario shows greater massing along Glebe Road, with the height tapering towards the single-family houses to the west. The preferred massing scenarios, all 3 are generally responsive to the proposed guiding principles that we just saw. Scenarios 2 and 3, again, show a modest bonus density to realize community benefits. And of the 2 scenarios, the third allows for the most open space as the building mass is concentrated along the arterial. For all scenarios, staff recommends there be a building height not to exceed 5 stories, given the surrounding context. And preliminary review appears to show that the number of projected trips to be further studied during the site plan review would be supported by the existing transportation system. Staff conducted this study in a manner that applies several refinements to address feedback from the Planning Commission and other bodies on recent studies. Staff has prepared a more streamlined study document and recommends acceptance of the study document. In conclusion, staff recommends that the County Board adopt a resolution to accept the Special General Land Use Plan study document and adopt the resolution to advertise hearings on a General Land Use Plan amendment from low residential to low medium residential. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Tulloch Rhodes. We're now ready to hear from the applicant with their own presentation. You can do it from your seat if you prefer, Mr. McGraw, or this is fine too.
I don't mind standing if it's okay with you.
Oh, you're just going to make me uncomfortable if you don't raise that. So, okay, good.
All right. Everyone hear me okay? Great.
Gotcha.
Good morning. My name is Clyde McGraw. I'm Vice President of Real Estate for Sunrise Senior Living. I'm here to present our proposal to amend the General Land Use Plan for 2000 North Glebe Road to allow for the potential redevelopment of the existing Sunrise of Arlington into a modern senior housing community. Before I get into the details of the project, I'd like to tell you a little bit about Sunrise Senior Living. At Sunrise Senior Living, we are a mission-based organization, and our mission is to champion quality of life for all seniors. In addition, we have a forward-looking vision statement, which is to create the preferred lifestyle for enjoying longer, healthier, happier lives. Sunrise is one of the largest providers of senior housing in North America with nearly 275 communities. We were founded over 40 years ago in Northern Virginia, and in fact, our first purpose-built Sunrise community was the Sunrise of Arlington, which we still operate and which we'll be discussing this morning. While Sunrise provides a full range of senior housing options from independent living through skilled nursing, our specialty is in assisted living and memory care, which is what exists at 2000 North Glebe Road today and what we are proposing for the redevelopment of the site. Assisted living is for seniors who need assistance with activities of daily living, including bathing, dressing, using the bathroom, mobility, and meals, while our memory care is for those seniors with Alzheimer's disease and other memory impairments. While traditionally Sunrise built only Victorian-style buildings, which I'm sure many of you have seen across the DMV, over the last 10 years, we've become much more forward-looking with our architecture. Now, each new Sunrise is designed to fit in aesthetically with each neighborhood they are built and to be much more reflective of the local design vernacular. For example, here are 4 recent Sunrise projects in different markets across the country, including Newton, Massachusetts, Burlingame, California, Issaquah, Washington, and Summit, New Jersey. Each new building is designed to fit within the local neighborhood. At Sunrise, we pride ourselves on being great members of the community. A redevelopment of the Sunrise of Arlington would allow us to provide services for about 100 seniors at any one time and will generate about 75 local jobs. We would invest more than $70 million into the development and would strive to integrate the building into its surroundings through architectural design. We see Sunrise as extensions of the community they serve by engaging with local schools, religious, and community programs. Finally, through Sunrise's Living with Generosity program, our seniors are able to give back to the community, for example, by assembling lunch bags for local shelters or baby blankets for local hospitals. At Sunrise, we put the health and well-being of our residents first. In fact, Sunrise is the first and largest provider in the senior living industry to achieve the prestigious WELL Health Safety rating across our entire portfolio, which reviews ongoing community management for items such as emergency preparedness, communication with our residents and their families, and our cleaning and sanitation procedures. Sunrise is also at the forefront of senior living design. The last 2 years, we've been awarded the Argentum Senior Living by Design Award for 2 of our newest communities in Northern Virginia, in Old Town Alexandria, and in Fairfax, which review aspects of design innovation and operational excellence. Now, looking at the existing Sunrise of Arlington site specifically, you can see it's located on the west side of Glebe Road at the corner of 20th Street, and we are just south of Langston Boulevard. When we review the Arlington market, we find there's a significant imbalance between the available supply and needed demand for our type of building. In fact, there's not been a new senior housing project built in Arlington County for over 20 years. When Sunrise estimates the needed supply within just 3 miles of the site, we estimate a need of approximately 1,300 assisted living units, while only 276 exist today. It is similar when we look at the needed supply of memory care units, which we estimate at approximately 700, while only about 100 units exist in the market today. There is clearly a great need for new senior housing in Arlington County. Here we have images of the existing Sunrise of Arlington. As I mentioned, this is our first purpose-built Sunrise, and we've been operating the community now for nearly 40 years. Unfortunately, as I'm sure everyone can imagine, there have been significant changes in the design of senior housing over the last 40 years, which has rendered the existing building functionally obsolete. It does not have the characteristics that are expected in modern senior housing. The hallways are too narrow, the bathrooms are too small and difficult to access, and there's not enough common space. Looking at the existing site plan, you have Glebe Road on the right side and 20th Street at the bottom of the page. The current building is L-shaped with a small surface parking lot and drop-off area. In addition to the current Sunrise of Arlington site, we also own the single-family home next door at 4725 20th Street, which is included in the project area. We've met with our neighbors and the local civic associations many times, and we have heard their concerns with the existing site that we believe we can significantly mitigate through a redevelopment. Specifically, we have heard concerns regarding insufficient parking on the site and the lack of a dedicated loading area. A redevelopment would allow us to significantly increase the number of parking spaces by putting the parking below grade, as well as creating a dedicated loading area. We've also heard concerns about stormwater management in this general area of Arlington. A redevelopment here would comply with the current Arlington County stormwater management standards to help alleviate some of the current issues in the area, compared to the existing building, which when built likely had no or limited stormwater management requirements. I should point out, as staff has mentioned, the GLUP study process does not allow for a detailed discussion of building design. All of these issues that I mentioned will be discussed in a future 4.1 site plan process before anything is built at the site. So while we can't talk about specifics about how the building will operate, the concerns that we've heard will be incorporated into the GLUP study document and will be an important element of any future building. Here we have a conceptual design of what a redevelopment of the site could look like. You'll notice that the parking's been put below grade with access off of 20th Street. From our neighbors, we've heard concerns with vehicular access off of 20th Street versus off Glebe Road, and Sunrise is open to studying both options during the site plan review process. The existing building is 3 stories today, and our proposed redevelopment would likely be 3 or 4 stories depending on final massing and setbacks. We would of course work with our neighbors and planning staff on appropriate design and height during the site plan review process. We've also heard concerns regarding speed and safety crossing Glebe Road in this area. While this is outside of our purview, Sunrise is certainly open to Arlington County introducing speed calming measures in this area of Glebe Road. Sunrise is also committed to biophilic design, as it's very important for our residents. This includes the principles of biophilia, including providing a green envelope, nature-inspired forms and shapes, natural light, organic patterns and processes, human relationships to nature, and sensory experiences. In addition, Sunrise is committed to tree preservation where possible. While we're hopeful that some of the trees on the exterior of the site can be preserved, the practical nature of development and construction, including putting parking below grade and introducing modern stormwater management practices, means that trees located in the middle of the site or with extensive root structures may not be able to be maintained. However, Sunrise will of course meet the current Arlington County tree coverage requirements through the planting of a variety of native species. Finally, we've heard from many residents of Arlington County regarding the need and desire for on-site affordable housing beds. Affordable housing is challenging in senior living because although you may be able to discount the rent someone pays, you can't discount the care that they receive. That being said, we have studied the issue here extensively, and while the potential density of this site would not feasibly allow affordable beds on site here, we are currently in the site plan review process for our proposed Sunrise of South Arlington project at 716 South Glebe Road. That site does provide the opportunity for some additional density, and we are exploring with staff the ability to provide additional on-site affordable housing beds at our Sunrise of South Arlington site to fulfill our obligations for affordable housing for both that project at 716 South Glebe Road and this project. Given that the two sites are less than 3 miles apart, they're within the same catchment area and would serve the same general population. This is another item that will obviously be discussed in greater detail during any site plan review process, but given the questions we've received, we want to be as responsive as possible at this point. Thank you for your time this morning. We look forward to answering any questions.
Thank you. I'm sure there will be some. Thank you, Mr. McGraw. And I know we have a representative, or hope we have a representative from the Planning Commission. Is Mr. Sarli with us today?
Yes, Mr. Chair, I'm here.
All right, great. Love to hear what the Planning Commission deliberated on with this item.
Good morning, County Board members. Thanks for having us. I'm Leo Sarli from the Planning Commission. Let's see, the PC heard this on the May 1st meeting, and as the report states, there was general consensus on moving ahead with this use on the site. Of course, there was a few concerns, and we tried or resisted not getting into the site plan review committee conversation. But generally speaking, there's pretty good consensus moving ahead. And then the discussion centered around making sure the use of elder care is maintained, the notion of, listening to the community concerns. And the one question that Commissioner Hughes had was this transitioning from a low-medium designation and not using an SD designation, which is the one they're using on the South Glebe. Perhaps staff can sort of elaborate on that a little bit. But other than that, I think the presentation was well received and generally supportive of the update. Thanks.
Thank you. And I'll amend the Planning Commission letter, which I think is very comprehensive as always on this matter. Do we have any other commissions speaking on this, Ms. Jacobs?
No, we do not.
All right, we're now ready to move to speakers from the public.
All righty, our first speaker is John Musso, followed by William McKee.
Good morning, members of the County Board. I'm John Musso, Government Affairs Manager at the Arlington Chamber of Commerce, and on behalf of the Chamber, I would like to reiterate support for the staff recommendation on these two actions before you, both the adoption of the GLUP study amendment document and the request to advertise public hearings for the Sunrise GLUP amendment. As specified in both of these presentations, Sunrise has been a presence in the North Arlington community for over 40 years and has provided personalized senior care in all sorts of different ways. And as Northern Virginia faces a shortage of senior housing, region-wide and within Arlington, it is becoming progressively more difficult for our older citizens to age in place. This project would provide up to 35 additional units in a convenient location in North Arlington. This project would additionally utilize the existing Sunrise land to accommodate this increase in senior living. And perhaps most of all, as emphasized previously, this is renovating a building that's at the end of its operational life. By going forward and going ahead with this project, this is going to ensure that Sunrise is going to be a presence in the Arlington community and providing the essential care that it does provide for generations to come, all while providing up to 75 local jobs for, again, generations to come. So we urge you to both adopt the document and to request to advertise future hearings. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next speaker is William McKee, followed by Randy Russo.
Good morning, members of the board. I'm speaking today in opposition to adoptions of the resolutions under consideration. My family and I have lived in the same house near Sunrise for the facility's entire existence, and we are now its closest neighbor on 20th Street. Obviously, we don't object to having an elder care facility nearby. We are only concerned that it be of the appropriate size for the neighborhood. We would strongly object to having a large multi-dwelling unit building such as an apartment house as our immediate neighbor in an R6 area. I think we need to be aware that any use restrictions in the GLUP as amended will be unenforceable if the zoning change is granted. Excuse me. Land uses available as of right under the less restrictive zoning designation sought here will override any restrictions in the GLUP. The board may decide to move forward with this project with the best intentions that the property be used for elder care, but once the zoning is changed, all bets will be off. The board will have little or no control over what is built on the property as of right. It also appears that the plan amendment process has been scheduled to run concurrently with the consideration of the site plan and rezoning. So it's natural to ask, what's the rush here? The good stewardship of Arlington land resources requires that affected residents, and especially their elected representatives, carefully consider the possible consequences, both positive and negative, before the GLUP amendment and rezoning are approved. An overlarge elder care facility or a multi-unit apartment building on this small site will fundamentally change the character of our neighborhood. I would strongly urge the board, all the board members, to hit the pause button on this for now. And please come and walk and visit our neighborhood if you have not.
Thank you, Mr. McKee.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Randy Russo, followed by Grace White.
Hello, board. I'll keep this short. I support the GLUP amendment change at Sunrise Assisted Living in North Glebe from R6 to R818 because it will allow more seniors to live in Arlington and to age in place. According to a report by the Community Foundation of Northern Virginia, adults over 65 are the fastest growing demographic in this region. I hope to live in Arlington when I'm old and hope to have places like this to stay. This change will expand the Sunrise facility to provide homes to 28, apparently up to 35 more seniors, and allow for convenient access for residents, friends, family members, and staff. So I encourage you to approve the amendment. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next speaker is Grace White, followed by William Lawson.
Do we have Grace joining us virtually?
I do not see Grace.
Okay.
Okay. William Lawson, followed by Michael Hamilton.
Good morning. For the record, I'm William B. Lawson, Jr. I represent the McKee family. What I wanted to share with you this morning is that if this plan amendment goes through and if the zoning goes to RA 818, there is no guarantee that the site plan will be done or that the use will be what you expect it to be. I was involved in the sale of the land to artists, and the artist did a really nice site plan for a very similar use on what I used to call Old Lee Highway. Artists had decided not to go forward with that site plan, and the reason is fallout from the pandemic. And that property is currently being marketed. I believe that it will probably be purchased by someone that will do housing for the elderly or a similar use. But it very well could have gone a different direction. It could have gone to a townhouse builder or an apartment builder. Now, that property, you all may remember, was already zoned RA. It was zoned RA 615, and part of it was 1530T. And so if it ends up being apartments or townhouses, it was already zoned for that. You have a very different situation here. You have an R6 parcel with homes very close to it, unlike you did in Artis. And the way that this should have been done is we should have amended the zoning ordinance to reallow this use in the R category. For many, many years, this use has been allowed in the R categories by use permit. And I did some manor care approvals and some other approvals in the R district, and it worked just fine. The way that the staff is leading, the direction that this is going, you could end up with something you don't expect here, which would not be good for the neighbors. Now, when this was taken out as a use in the R categories was when we redid the zoning ordinance, and I believe that was an error. It should not have been taken out, but it in fact was. So I'm sure that Kedrick and I can, resolve any issues that happen, between the neighbors and the developer. If they can't, I'm sure the Planning Commission can protect them. But it does no good if they choose not to use the site plan that gets approved. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, Grace White has joined us. She was having some technical difficulties.
Okay, if
Okay.
Michael Hamilton will hang on for a second, we'll circle back to Grace White.
Awesome. Thanks for that. I appreciate it. I just wanted to speak in favor of this proposal. I think on top of the pressing need to house seniors in Arlington, I think it's a great location for more density. We've got Plain Langston Boulevard going on. So in the lifetime of this building, the area is just going to become a better place to live, more walkable, more safe. There are already apartment buildings close by. There's the Avalon at Langston and Glebe. There's another apartment building a couple blocks north on 21st Street. I don't think it would change the neighborhood character that much. I grew up myself a few blocks away from it. And I think, as far as, making it an even better place for the residents to live, safer for pedestrians and people outside of cars, maybe we should look at planning Glebe, So I think this is a great thing. And I think we should, instead of stopping this process, I think we should think about ways to make that area an even better place for the future residents of the Sunrise. So thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, our next speaker is Michael Hamilton, followed by Dan Albin.
All right, I'm also speaking in favor of the proposal. I'm very glad that Sunrise is interested in adding more capacity to our community. I know we'll need it. Every one of us, in this meeting is going to need that kind of care one day if we're lucky to live that long. So I think we should approve it. We need to give them the most flexibility to expand operations. It's a great addition to our community. I also don't think there's anything wrong with having a larger building in a neighborhood of smaller buildings. I have every reason to believe that this will be a building with great neighbors that we'll all be happy to have nearby. So please approve it. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Next speaker is Dan Albin, followed by Tim Hewson.
Good morning. I'm a longtime resident of Arlington County. I've lived here about 20 years. I've owned a home a block away from Glebe Road since 2009. I work on Glebe Road about a mile away from the site near Fairfax Drive. And I frequently house sit and dog sit for friends who live nearby near the Mount Olivet Church. So I'm very familiar with this site because I frequently walk dogs past it on 20th Street. I too support the proposal. We need more senior housing in Arlington. This is already a site being used for that purpose. This is more efficiently using the land to allow for more seniors to live there. Arlington has a large and growing senior community, and more members of that community are going to need assisted living housing as we move forward. Although I am not a senior today, I do aspire to be one in a few decades, and it would be very good to have housing options available for me at that time as well. The importance of this sort of housing, I think, is even more important in Arlington, where we have a lot of aging housing stock, much of which is multi-level, much of which is townhomes or has stairs that pose obvious hazards to seniors and difficulties for seniors to get around. Arlington is an area that, and Northern Virginia as a whole, is an area where adults over 65 are among the fastest growing groups of our population, and the vast majority do not want to live in homes with stairs. And so having senior living facilities that are designed for seniors that address that either through elevators or first floor living is something we really need. The location is excellent. It's on Glebe Road. That's a major artery. I'm familiar with that area. As Grace White just mentioned, that's an area where there is already some apartment buildings in the nearby. It's not far from Langston Boulevard. And so I support this development. I support additional housing in Arlington. As a co-founder and leader of the YIMBYs of Northern Virginia, we don't just support housing for young people or young families. We support more housing for people of all ages. And there is a critical shortage of housing for seniors. And that's why I encourage the board to take action and approve this plan. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next speaker is Tim Houston, followed by Audrey Clement.
Good morning, everyone. Can you hear me?
We can.
Thank you. I call on you to support this proposed project and the necessary change to the GLUP and the relevant zoning changes. This would give seniors more places to live near their families in Arlington. I live exactly 1 mile from this site in the single-family homing neighborhood of Maywood, where my family's owned a single-family home for 11 years. I can imagine this would be a great location for my parents, my wife, myself, or another family member to live in close proximity to my family home. This location seems ideal for a senior living facility. It's within walking distance of Langston Boulevard and Lee Heights, and close to Boston, which allows for workers and residents' families good access to public transportation. The scale feels appropriate, in particular since it's almost directly across Glebe Road from a much larger multifamily complex. As medical standards change, modernizing this home is reasonable and inevitable. Expanding it by 28 more units to bring it to 85 units seems modest and appropriate. So I leave you with 3 big picture thoughts on why this project makes sense. First, it helps affordability of housing. By contributing to the supply of housing for seniors, this will help fight the ever-increasing cost of housing for seniors in Arlington. Second, it's good for the environment. Given its central location in Arlington, it'll reduce demand for housing farther out, thus reducing time spent in traffic and the bulldozing of forests farther out. Third, it's good for economics. Expanding the housing stock increases employment and economic activity. Lastly, I want to thank the staff and County Board for your contribution of your service. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Next speaker is Audrey Clement, followed by Ann Bodine. Ms. Clement?
Ms. Clement? It's muffled.
Okay, how's that? Is that any better?
Yes, it is.
Okay. Here are just some of the objections Arlington tenant Suzanne Sundberg has raised on the GLUP study for the Sunrise Senior Living Facility on North Glebe Road. The proposed development represents a significant density giveaway without any clear community benefits being received in return. Quite the opposite. This project appears to conflict with numerous goals and objectives listed in multiple comprehensive plan elements, as well as in other county plans and initiatives, as outlined below. The site comprises a little more than 1 acre, so essentially this is a spot zoning change. Continually amending the GLUP for such small sites undermines the integrity of the GLUP itself. Why have a GLUP if all spot zoning changes requests are granted by a special GLUP process, thus subverting the county's overarching land use planning and goal? It is clear that the increased density requested in this land use change is inconsistent with the existing zoning R6 and is also incompatible with the surrounding low-density residential housing. It is also clear that the site will be dug out to accommodate the underground garage, and all or nearly all existing pervious land and tree canopy will be replaced by impervious surfaces. Thus, acceptance of this special GLUP study as currently envisioned conflicts with the draft forestry and natural resources plan to, quote, maintain 40% tree canopy countywide, end quote. The loss of existing tree canopy coupled with the conversion of the site to nearly 100% impervious cover will generate more stormwater runoff than currently exists, resulting in significant recurrent overland flooding, and directly conflicts with the county's stated goals in its flood-resilient Arlington Planning and Associated Stormwater Management Plan amendments adopted in 2023. What's unclear to me is why a building that's just 35 years old must be raised and runs counter to the County Board's own 2015 zero waste resolution, as well as zero waste principles in its 2024 update to the county's solid waste master plan. Doubling the building's footprint on this site will increase impervious heat trapping services that likewise are inconsistent with the goals in Arlington's community energy plan. It appears that no traffic study has been performed during business school hours on both Believe and 20th Street to assess the project's impact on traffic. Given that a lot of children are required to walk to the adjacent Believe schools, such an oversight would seem to be antithetical to the county's Vision Zero action plan, as well as the Safer Routes to School initiative. This is just some of the objections that Suzanne Sundberg sent to you in a document.
We appreciate it. We've got those comments. We appreciate your time.
Next speaker is Ann Bodine.
Good morning, Mr. Chair. I'm Ann Bodine of Arlingtonians for Our Sustainable Future. I'm here to ask that you not approve the RTA or the application as presented to change this property from low residential to low medium residential with an associated rezoning from R6 to RA 818. ASF continues to be concerned about increasing density that does not take into account the need for services for new residents without attending to all of our comp plan goals. Virginia requires that jurisdictions give reasonable consideration for the impacts of zoning outcomes. There's none of that here. There's only confusion. Confusion on stormwater, where staff notes this site has issues with stormwater flow being discharged to the surface, a condition that would need to be addressed as part of any redevelopment. But it is not addressed in the GLUP, and it must be to ensure we meet our county stormwater plan. Confusion about tree canopy. Staff notes the site currently has 50% tree canopy on 1 acre. Ripping out so many trees, just as we have learned our canopy goals have slipped out of reach, is not supportable. Greenery is key to our mental health, all the more so for people who may not be able to easily access nature beyond their homes, such as those in Sunrise. I note that biophilia does not a tree make. I ask the board to require the applicant to provide 20% tree canopy on this site to meet the goals of our forestry plan. Confusion as to RA 818 as a zoning proposal next to a residential zone with a 35-foot cap. ASF asks that you approve only RA 1426 zoning, which tops out at 60 feet, more appropriate as abutting a 35-foot cap next door. ASF also asks that you require step downs to the neighbors, making it less likely we'll see the horrid full infill modeling that no one in their right mind would want to live in. Confusion as to the various FARs and units per acre that are being bandied about. Models show a possible density of 150 units per acre, but RA 818 only allows 36 units per acre, and your documents also show you're planning 85 units per acre, and it is currently zoned for only 10 units per acre. There needs to be more clarity. Confusion about why you would incentivize the tear down of a 30-year-old building, one I see as a lovely Victorian. Tear-downs of only 30-year-old buildings are contraindicated by climate change and sustainability goals of our energy plan. Confusion about uses that include multifamily residential housing is seen in the first model presented today. Why does Sunrise intend to build non-senior housing? ASF requests that the board stipulate this site may be upclub for the purposes of senior living only. Some confusion about the need cited for senior housing. Sunrise is offering incentives for new leases at other facilities in the county now, and units in the Jefferson are going begging. In sum, ASF asked the board to not approve any GLUP or density change that would allow any use other than senior living. We asked for no zoning above 14.26. or that would allow more than 60 feet in height. We asked for 20% tree canopy, stormwater mitigation, and step downs to the neighbors. These belong in the special GLUP as community benefits, and they should not be shunted off to later site planning, as I understand was done for 2500 Wilson Boulevard just a moment ago. I also note that affordable density for a separate site may not be counted and is not relevant to consideration of this project today. ASF asks that GLUP appropriately reflect all comp plan goals and addresses these as a matter of urgency. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And does that conclude our public speakers?
Yes, it does.
So the discussion is now with the board. Before we get to a motion, why don't we make sure we have an opportunity to ask any questions before we move to that? Vice Chair Garvey, if you would like to ask a question, you just pop right on in.
I appreciate the invitation. I'm fine. Thank you.
All right. Start off with Ms. Crystal.
Sure. So maybe a question or two discussion about the difference of what we'll see with the general land use plan RTA that we're considering today and what we can expect to see in the site plan, since that's, I know, always a source of confusion. This is a challenging process, and I think we heard some of that in the comments. And then also just a couple questions about affordability for our staff as well as for the applicant here. Why don't I take the first and then I can pause so I don't monopolize the floor here. I really appreciated Mr. Lawson's point about sort of expanding the allowability of this use in our districts in general and whether that might be a better approach to zoning. I think that's an interesting food for further thought. But I just wanted to be clear, the point he made about, we could end up with something we don't expect here. We talk a lot, of course, about the accepting the special GLUP study document here is not an entitlement. But one of the things I was interested in is if we were to entitle Sunrise at a later date, I just want to be clear that any entitlement Sunrise would seek with your vision of assisted living could not be then converted to residential, right? It would be very hard, given your model, for you to sell an entitlement and have that developed as approved as market rate apartments.
That's correct. Yeah, our buildings are especially designed for senior housing. It would not be easily convertible to multifamily.
Okay.
And I would just add that any entitlement that was obtained for a senior living use, if that use changed, even if the physical building remained, if that use changed from a senior living use to a multifamily use, which is a separate use category, that would require an amendment to the special exception site plan.
Very helpful. Thank you both. So I think that's a really important point. The adoption of the resolution of the special GLUP study is in some ways an invitation to consider site plans. If circumstances change and there were instead a residential market rate apartment site plan that came forward, we can have that community conversation, but there is really no universe in which we would approve elder care, senior care, and then it would, something different than what we expected would then be built. So I'll yield the floor for other points and then wanted to get back to affordability.
Sure. Any other comments? Mr. DeFerranti.
It could be a question. I guess this is just aligning myself with Ms. Crystal's comments. I appreciate our resident, Mr. McKee, coming in. And just, I would this fully intend, and I cannot imagine currently, it would come back to the board, but I cannot imagine currently any desire to switch from senior units to multifamily and general units. So I think that's a site plan piece, and I would want to have that restriction. So that's just a comment to sort of underscore in response to the couple of questions that have come up. Thanks.
Thank you. Mr. Karantonis.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First of all, I mean, I was puzzled by the conversation about, we dropped the elder care use at some point. Mr. Lawson referred to that, and I don't know what the rationale behind that is. I have to note that many communities, many modern communities, begin to make less of a distinction between general housing and older adult housing because older adults are not anymore. I mean, the older adult facilities are not anymore associated with a hospital-like, there is the element of assisted living, but most of the population that lives there are fully functional people who, go about their daily life like everybody else. So older adult housing, to me, is basically housing with some extras. Where you have some more staff coming in and out. Here you will have some more parking traffic in a multiple family building. This basically is a wash at the end of accounts. But I wanted to know why we did that, and since we have this conversation here. The second thing is, and you, Ms. Brown, you can address that. You mentioned that we want to prioritize water management. I thought that we are prioritizing water management through the land disturbance ordinance, and that this is a site plan and a construction permit and code issue. Is there meant to be something special? I understand the topography there, but is there something special underneath the designation or the expressed guidance?
I think we would require all of the current standards to be met through the site plan review process to ensure that there's no stormwater management issues.
I always understood that they will have to mitigate on site and they have to be credible and effective. So,
correct.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. So for Ms. Rhodes, Mr. Fisarelli, can you just give us a sense of some of the analysis that informed the decision to support an RA 818 as opposed to an RA 1426? Is it simply a matter of just looking at the maximum amount of FAR that could be supported, or were there other considerations that go into that ultimate recommendation?
So RA 818 allows for elder care as a use with a maximum FAR of 1.5. And we felt that it was appropriate here. It's appropriate for this residential area, and it can allow for the development of an appropriate building, if there are the appropriate tapers, setbacks, et cetera. So we felt that it was an appropriate category here.
And others like 1426 you looked at as just I'm not arguing for it. Just what was the decision to not offer that as a recommendation?
So I think RA 1826, RA 8, whatever.
818, 1426, however you want to do it.
Numbers is appropriate. It can allow for a little bit more height, and then we can get that tapering. So you saw in some of the models that we presented, for instance, where we were able to have the additional height and density up along the arterial and then taper it down towards the single-family houses to the west and towards the townhouses to the north.
All right, so with a modest increase in FAR allowed, it gives you a lot greater flexibility in terms of sculpting something so that it can fit within other neighborhood concerns due to the increased height allowed. I'm just trying to interpret it for myself.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. All right, Mr. DeFranti, and then Ms. Crystal, I think you have round two.
There's one last. I do think affordability is a big issue that we'll want to touch on. To Dr. Clement and Ms. Bodine's questions, I guess this might be for Ms. Rhodes or Mr. Fisarelli. It's many of the concerns regarding community benefits. I just don't know that I believe that at the special GLUP study we can actually engage in that conversation, and that's both community benefits writ broadly, and then a number of the specific concerns that Ms. Bodine identified. Additional work would be done at the site plan process. Do I have that correct? That it wouldn't really be appropriate to even engage in community benefit, and the further fine-grained discussion needs to be done at site plan?
That's correct, yes. What we conducted was a high-level general land use plan study, and so all those finer-grained details are better worked out through the site plan process. And also, of course, any of our regulations related to stormwater or affordable housing contributions, et cetera, would need to be met in order for it to be an appropriate site plan for you to consider.
Got it, thanks. I perhaps can reread 4.1, but really does seem that community benefits is not in the special GLUP and is in 4.1 site plan. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Crystal.
Okay, so I want to talk a little bit about affordability here, which to sort of establish expectations. Our applicant noted in your presentation that this is not designating or creating affordable elder care opportunities, particularly assisted living opportunities, are not just a matter of designating the units. There also needs to be a plan for affordable care. And I think we've seen how complicated this is in our support for Culpeper Gardens over the years. Let me ask for input both from our staff, if you're able, or to call on a colleague in housing if they're here to join us, to talk a little bit about the elder care study, which the board had directed, actually speaking of artists, which Mr. Lawson brought up, then that staff take on, the timeline for that, and anything you can share about the initial scope in terms of how our usual tools for the designation of affordable units can intersect with opportunities to support affordable care. And then I'm going to, after that, ask the applicant to talk a little bit about your model vis-a-vis subsidies, Medicaid waivers, and Medicare waivers, and other programs from the state that might allow someone to sort of purchase discounted care, so to speak, for a higher need individual. So Ms. Tulloch-Rhodes, thank you.
Yes, thank you. So senior housing, as you mentioned, entails both housing and service costs. And the Arlington County zoning ordinance currently does not account for this difference. The Housing Division, in coordination with the Planning Division and the Department of Human Services, is conducting a senior housing affordability study. This study will examine how an affordability requirement that addresses both the housing and the service components could be structured for senior housing projects approved either through the site plan process or through the Columbia Pike form-based code. Staff has recently hired a consultant to prepare an economic analysis and is evaluating the standards established in our neighboring jurisdictions. It is anticipated that recommendations will be brought forward later this year for review by advisory boards, commissions, and ultimately the county board.
Fantastic. That's really helpful. And my understanding from our Commission on Aging is that other peer jurisdictions have navigated how to kind of require this as part of the conversation, or at least treat affordable spots as a community benefit. So I'm hopeful that's something we can do. Really pleased to hear us by the end of the year. So can I guess to kind of reframe my question, do you all have within the sort of Sunrise family tenants now, residents now who are receiving subsidy programs, state or federal aid as a way of covering their care?
Currently, we are only a private pay organization, so no, not typically. We are certainly open to exploring those avenues. We do other things to try to increase affordability, including having a variety of different unit sizes, 2 bedrooms, 1 bedroom studios. We have a number of residents that end up sharing units to make it more affordable. And at the end of the day, I think our strongest avenue is just bringing additional units to the market to keep what's there affordable and let market forces bring down costs.
Good. I appreciate that. I mean, I will say, I think as we've certainly found on the market rate housing side, there is a dramatic need for supply. There is also a need for targeted interventions, especially for our neighbors who make 50% or less of area median income, which the market alone is probably not going to provide given the expense of this service. So I look forward to thinking about what tools we have, what we can join with state and federal to do, whether there needs to be a creation of local programs. I will say just in closing, I think you already caught this from our Planning Commission, but I will note the approach of accommodating the need for affordability on just the southern site and not the northern site is, at the time of bringing forward a proposal, unlikely to be well received by the community. And so I hope that is something, a conversation you all can continue, particularly if those two sites come together around the same time. If there are ways to think about, I know these are very high costs to develop as well as to operate, but if there are ways to sort of share costs between the two sites so that we can achieve opportunities for lower or moderate income seniors in both sites, I think that would be, or I know that would be much better received by our commissions, this board, and others in the community. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Karantonis.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was about to ask about this, the idea of the same catchment area and how the north and south side would work in this scenario, that we would find a way to define affordability, because as you pointed out, it's not only the housing costs, but also the care that comes with that. Of course, several federal programs are supporting the care side, and we do as well. In Culpeper Gardens, this is what we are doing, actually a unique program in the entire metropolitan area. What I wanted to ask is something very, very simple about the demographics, so that I understand what same catchment area means. Are the residents that are now living in the North Arlington side or the future South Arlington, are these meant to be mostly for Arlingtonians or mostly from people from the close by region, or would you expect also tenants from other places?
So yes, to clarify, we typically find that most of our residents come within 3 to 5 miles of every site. So when we evaluate a potential site, we draw a 3-mile ring around it. So for both North Arlington and South Arlington, those 3-mile rings overlap with each other. So from Sunrise's perspective, we would anticipate drawing residents from 3 miles to the north or 3 miles to the south. So when I say catchment area, that's that 3-mile ring that we would serve.
So this is, so aging in community is part of your business model?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that?
So aging in community is part of your business model, or the intention?
It's an extremely important part of our business model. So we find that, first of all, residents who grew up, raised families, had careers in Arlington, want to stay in Arlington. They don't want to be, in Fairfax County or Alexandria. They want to be in Arlington. And not only that, their families that are local in Arlington want their family members close. Again, they don't want them to be a half an hour away. They want them to be local in Arlington. So yes, it's incredibly important for us to be in the communities where our residents are from.
Thank you.
Vice Chair Garvey.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll just do some concluding remarks. I appreciate the conversation, particularly about this last bit about affordability. I think the applicant's presentation at the beginning showing the mismatch between the supply and the demand for both assisted living and memory care really should have us thinking much beyond this particular issue, and I think we are, but there is a bit of, I think they call it a silver tsunami, I think is what they're talking about, which is my generation, I'll own up to it. But there are a lot of people coming along and aging, and this is going to be more and more of an issue. Happy to prove the GLUPs here. And appreciate also pointing out that the site plan is a different animal that will come back, and then a lot of these details will be discussed. But I do want to say that it's, watching things for a while, when we get new buildings coming on, I know there's concern about increased density in higher buildings, but in general, it really does. There's a lot of work on transportation, this enhanced connectivity, making sure that it's, we do plant trees and trying to make it good for people who live there, working on the safety. Stormwater management, much improved, because when a lot of these buildings were built, there were a lot of things we didn't understand about stormwater management. So it seems to me this is bringing a lot of benefits, contrary to what some folks are saying. So I'm happy to approve this and look forward to looking at a site plan and an actual project later. And do think that we sort of need to put a little asterisk or note to start thinking more about the issue of how many people in Arlington are going to be aging, are going to be needing facilities, and how many of them might not be able to afford something like this facility will be. Thank you.
Thank you. Have we exhausted questions? Are we ready for a motion?
I have a motion, Mr. Chair, which is as follows. I move that we adopt the resolution in the staff report to accept the 2000 North Glebe Road Special GLUP study document, and that we further adopt the resolution to advertise future public hearings by the Planning Commission and County Board, both on dates that will be concurrent with those for considerations of a future site plan and rezoning applications, to consider a GLUP amendment from low residential, which is to say 1 to 10 units per acre, to low medium residential for the area located at the northwest corner of North Glebe Road and 20th Street North. That is, for anyone watching along at home, the manager's recommendation.
Thank you, and seconded by Mr. DeFerranti. And now we'll have comments on that motion.
Sure. I think nothing too much further than what we've discussed to say. I think this is appropriate. I do appreciate the neighborhood concerns. I think those are, on balance, I hope things that can be mitigated through specific planning. And this is always the deficit at which we find ourselves, entertaining a GLUP amendment or a special GLUP study without the specifics of a site plan to really be able to answer those questions about, to address Ms. Bodine's confusion, as she described it, or confusion about transportation, landscaping, programmatic, et cetera. So again, I see these opportunities, these GLUP study documents, the advertisement as a way of inviting proposals that are consistent with what the community has discussed so far, the things that are our priorities. I think that this staff study document does a nice job summarizing what those priorities may look like, and also creating the sandbox, the boundary for the level of density that might be appropriate here and what is outside of bounds. So I thank staff for our work. I know these studies are no small undertaking, and appreciate the thoughtfulness that's been brought to bear here, as well as thank you to our commissions. Look forward to seeing this conversation move forward as for its twin site on South Glebe Road. This is, as others have established, and I think as our Commission on Aging in particularly has emphasized to us, an immense need. And I'm glad that we can continue evolving our planning documents and policies in order to do our part to meet it.
Thank you. Mr. DeFerranti.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would align on the affordable housing points that Ms. Crystal raised and Ms. Guevara in the Planning Commission. I guess I'm hoping that we can do the work to see if there is a solution that might be, that sort of recognizes the realities of density on site and contribution, but also seeks to address equity and geographic distribution. It's not an easy set of things to work on, but I'd love to see if we can outwork the problem to some extent, or the challenge, the opportunity, I guess I would say. Mr. McKee, I'd like to walk the area with you if we can at this next before this next stage, so I'll follow up to do that. And then last, I'm struck by putting the people who could live in these locations central, we're going to have more seniors, and much as we all would like to not be mortal, we are mortal. And so I just, in the contributions of Dr. Clement, Mr. Alban, and Ms. Bodine, there are lots of other concerns, but I hope to get to 85. And if I do, I hope that there's enough supply of housing for the various different strengths and weaknesses I have when I get to that day. Thanks.
Thank you. Mr. Karantonis.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for the work in this club study. It was quite interesting. While you say that streamlined, etc., it is, and it was actually quite a pleasure to read it and to relate to that. I visited the site on Thursday, and it was very easy for me to relate the reading with the actual neighborhood there. I just have to say this is a good starting point. We will have to talk about building scale. We'll have to talk about the situation of the building, the orientation on the lot. We'll have to talk definitely about neighborhood manners and scaling down to meet the immediate neighbors to the degree that's possible in this topography. We will need to discuss about the relationship of the building with 20th Street and North Glebe Road, which is a major arterial. It's actually a good thing that the building is on a major arterial. It has so much capacity and offers the connection. Somebody mentioned that. I think you, Mr. Alban, said that it's close to Ballston and it's close also to Langston Boulevard. This is essential. So, I think that, colleagues, you mentioned that we are facing a dramatic increase in the 65-plus demographic cohort, and on top of that, we have a dramatic deterioration of the economic status and financial safety of many older adults, and senior poverty is a real thing, and it's also a real thing in North Arlington, as it is in South Arlington, it is everywhere in this United States of America. This is a serious problem, and therefore I think not only on this side of the dais, but the community will have to discuss a lot about what needs to be done in order to get to affordable housing for older adults, but also to affordable care for older adults. I understand that this spans over many, individual jurisdictions. Departmental work is coming, so that we will have a better grasp of what needs to be done from now onward. I also think that it's a good point to discuss and understand what actually older adult housing really means in the context of today. So I had conversations with members of our aging commission. They're seeking multi-generational social connections, realizing opportunities of social engagement, of living a productive lifestyle. These are critical things. I mean, we don't want to support anymore loneliness and isolation from social and urban life. These facilities and the housing associated with them has to be in the middle of the community. This is where older adult housing belongs. And I'm excited to see this club study supporting this idea, and I hope that we'll have a very nice and innovative product and project to discuss through the site plan application that I guess it's coming.
Thank you.
And by the way, this is only the request to advertise, right? We're not done.
Just a club study. Yeah, there we go. So, not just. It's a wonderful club study, actually. So with that, I'll just add a few comments. There's, for the most part, it's pretty clear that people have looked at this site and the analysis that has been done as it relates to the general land use plan and made the conclusion that I share, that this is appropriate and there are some appropriate considerations to guide staff's consideration of any associated site plans and requests to rezone. And so I certainly associate myself with all of that. As to the concerns that have been raised, I am certainly not surprised of them. I've walked the neighborhood fairly frequently with neighbors on a variety of circumstances, and things are tight for sure. And there's a desire to make sure that any changes actually mitigate existing issues and don't contribute new ones. So I fully understand people taking a fine look at this from the community. As to a few of those concerns, spot zoning, we hear that from people from time to time, but it's really a misapplication of the term. This is a look at changing the zoning to reflect what is very much the use of the site as it is right now. It's a multiple family building site. The zoning will reflect that. So spot zoning really refers to when you take a zoning district and provide without basis, planning or analysis or study a change to benefit a particular owner over the exclusion of the broader community. This is nothing at all like that. And in fact, what I love about what we're doing here in Arlington, because we don't have specific plan guidance that captures this particular site, we're taking it a step further to provide that contemporary look and analysis as to what is exactly appropriate so that we avoid what is the danger of spot zoning, and that is being arbitrary and capricious. If you've planned it, it ain't arbitrary or capricious. With that, a lot of the other things that people have brought up in terms of wanting to address stormwater management, wanting to make sure parking is managed, making sure that the open space provides an improvement, that we can adhere to the principles of biophilia as well as our energy standards. Those are all considerations that rightfully go in the site plan process, which we expect will come at some point in the future. And it's important, even though I know in Arlington a lot of this stuff is complicated, that we not shift the goalpost and look for the GLUP study document to address those issues, because we don't have the general land use plan addressing all of those specific issues. If we did, we wouldn't have a need for an SPRC. So it's important, even though it's kind of complicated and a little bit of an alphabet soup, that each of these components has integrity so that they can do what they're intended to do. And as it relates to the site plan, instead of thinking conceptually, abstractly, we look for a proposal that requires a degree of granularity from an applicant so that the community can actually consider something that's tangible and not ethereal. And that's where we get to the level of determining what are the appropriate mitigations and benefits that a particular project should deliver. And with that, I think if the guidance of the GLUP study is applied throughout the SPRC faithfully, we're going to see a lot of improvements that can come from redevelopment, certainly improved open space, more functional open space that can adhere to some of our latest and greatest thinking about biophilia and sustainability. Stormwater, which is a huge concern. This site currently is not contributing to any effective stormwater mitigation based on current needs and standards. Through redevelopment, it can do so. And of course, supply of necessary housing with the focus on seniors is incredibly important. Just last month, or in April, spotlighted that the COG analysis looks at by 2050, the largest age demographic in the Washington metropolitan region will be adults 65 and older. We actually have to do our part with this and consistently throughout to make sure the variety of ways in which seniors will have needs up to and past then are met. So with that, pleased to support where we are and look forward to seeing this become a little bit more focused with a specific 4.1. Ms. Garvey, do you have any other concluding comments?
I'm getting ready to vote, Mr. Chair.
Very good. So we are there. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? The ayes have it. Thank you all very much. Thank you for the work. And with that, Ms. Jacobs, do we have any other business before the board?
We do not.
Since we do not, everyone, we are going to be in recess until Tuesday, May 16th at 3:00 p.m. Ms. Garvey, you take care.
And good.
Will do. Take care. Thank you.